Nowadays, many children and teenagers are being exposed to social media from a very young age. So, what do you think is the role of social media in developing a child and having an impact on their mind?
Both social media and AI have their pros and cons. Social media, it can actually give students, young adults, or adults the space to learn, explore, and even express themselves. But it becomes a con when we think that the real life is a real life.
Can you please let us know what are the signs of depression?
You might see that there is loss of interest in studies. There could be academic decline as well, and the child might.
How does someone know if they have ADHD?
The full form of ADHD is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. The child might have difficulty focusing onto one thing. They might shift their attention. They have difficulty in sustaining their attention. Another part would be.
Hello everyone, I am Naisargi Desai from class 11.
And I'm Kushagra Sharma from class 6.
We are back with another podcast, and for today's episode, we have Dr. Oshin Parekh. She is a clinical psychologist who has a PhD in psychology. She did her MSc in clinical psychology from Bangalore. She is also the founder of Seven Step Healthcare Center in Valsad and works with Srimad Rajchandra Hospital in Dharampur.
Dr. Ocean has worked with the Central Education Ministry of India in training teachers about neurodevelopmental disorder in children in Pondicherry, Daman, Diu, and Dadra and Nagar Haveli. She has also worked on a project with the esteemed Stanford University towards helping women going through postpartum depression. In Valsad, she has trained frontline government officials and workers on suicide, depression, domestic violence, and teenagers with mental health issues.
As we are dealing with the topic of mental health, my very first question is what exactly is mental health?
Okay. So, mental health often refers to emotional and behavioral well being. It is, I think, in many ways as important as our physical health. And in fact, 1 in 7 Indians suffer from some kind of mental health issue, and very few acknowledge it, and even fewer get professional support. So, caring for your mental health is not when things go bad or when your health starts to deteriorate. I feel it is as simple as how you care for your physical health consistently every day with small habits. Actually, what is mental health all about?
Okay, ma'am, moving further. I have a question that is it normal to feel sad sometimes?
Yes, yes, completely normal. Because I feel that you can't experience happiness if you haven't ever felt sad. And understand that sadness is a very natural emotion. Because, like, we all emotions are very important in life to experience in life. It becomes difficult when sadness is there for a very long time. You start feeling heavy and you have physical symptoms like maybe breathlessness, heartbeat gets fast, or any other physical symptoms. So that is a time, it's a point where it is concerning and you should take professional help. Otherwise, I feel life is like a roller coaster. How when the roller coaster goes up, you feel happy. When the roller coaster goes down, you actually feel happy that time also. But in life, you only want things to go uphill. So I think in life, we also have to look for that balance, that even happiness and sadness are both important and equal part of our life, and we have to embrace them equally.
Yes. And is it okay to cry sometimes?
Definitely. I feel crying is a very important method or way to release our emotions, because crying actually helps for us to feel lighter. Sometimes, when we don't release our emotion, we can actually suppress them and it can have a negative impact on our mind and our body. So, yes, definitely. I think crying is normal and completely okay.
Next question I want to ask you is how does someone know if they have anxiety?
Feeling anxious sometimes is completely normal, and we all feel anxious before exams, before results, or before something important. It is a concern when you feel it is getting out of control, you feel constant worry, there's overthinking, or you have physical manifestation, you have restlessness, your heartbeat increases, breathlessness, you feel heavy in the head. Some children also have gut related issue. They might have upset stomach or feel fatigued or tired. And when this manifestation goes on for a very long time, then it is a time when you should actually talk to someone, either your teacher, your parent, your friend, and start seeing how can you learn to manage this anxiety better.
As we have talked about anxiety, now can you please let us know what are the signs of depression?
Depression is not when you feel sad for a day or two. It usually lasts longer than that. And when a child or a student is going through depression, you might see that there is loss of interest in studies. There could be academic decline as well. And the child might seem very quiet or withdrawn. The child might not enjoy talking or playing with his friends, would not participate in activities that he was or she was liking before. And all of these signs might feel very, it might get missed a lot of times, because right now I think these days we are so busy in our day-to-day life that a lot of time parents and teachers also don't observe these behaviors in the classroom. And it is very important to have an environment in the class where children can talk openly. So yeah, like I feel these are the few signs where you can understand if a child is going through depression or even anxiety. Also, the child might feel tired, might have difficulty concentrating. There will be changes in his sleep routine, appetite, and he might also have feeling of hopelessness. So yeah, these together I feel are very important signs of depression that we should not miss.
Moving to the next topic about school and academic pressure, I think the most common problem and question that almost students of all ages are facing, that why do we get so stressed before exams?
So the stress is not actually about the test. It is actually linked to expectation, because it could be your own expectation, it could be your parents' expectation, your teacher's expectation, or societal expectation. So the pressure, when it is created before the exam, the brain goes in fight, flight, freeze mode, which is that it sees the exam as a danger, as a threat. That's why all the physical symptoms starts getting activated. And it is important to understand this is the distress that we are talking about. But stress is always not negative. There is something called as eustress, which is a positive stress, because we all need some kind of stress before exam to keep us motivated. And that is the stress which actually will help us to study better, to perform better. So it is important to understand what kind of stress you're experiencing. Is it distress, which is causing your mind to go blank before exam? You are not able to recall, you are not able to focus, or it's eustress, which is actually motivating you and able and you're performing even better.
Another question related to this is how do we deal with pressure from school and parents?
Usually pressure from parents in school, it comes from a place of concern. And I understand that sometimes it can get very overwhelming. So the few things that I feel we all should keep in our mind is focus on what is in your control. The things that are in your control are how you prepare, how you study well, that is in your control. Results and how it is going to go, it's not in your control. Second, I feel that it is important that you have to remember that the marks are just one part of your life, it's not your identity. So just like focus on learning more or giving your best. I think this is a few of the simple things that I feel it can help you with the pressure. And one special note for all the parents and teachers, I would say that like encourage open communication with your children, and provide more support, provide more encouragement, and rather than putting a constant pressure on them that you have to do well, you have to pass, or you have to bring these many marks, because this is only going to affect their confidence and self-esteem. So yeah, I feel like just focus on learning more, and yeah, like exams will not be as pressure or as it seems.
Also, ma'am, how should parents support their children's mental health?
The most important thing will be listening without judgment. Because I feel a lot of children don't open up in front of their parents because they feel they'll be misunderstood, or maybe parents will not like what they are saying. So that's why I feel it is important to just ask them normally in their day that, how are you doing? How is everything going on? Is everything good at your school? How are your friends doing? So these questions actually you kind of promotes healthy communication with your children. And I think right now these days we see communication changing into instructions. ये मत करो, वो करो, ये क्यों नहीं किया, इतना क्यों नहीं किया. So I feel all of these instruction based communication is kind of impacting the kids, and they face difficulty in opening up to their parents itself. Because I have so many teen clients and they come to me and they say कि मेरे mom dad को नहीं पता चलना चाहिए that I'm coming for therapy. And I feel such a small child coming for therapy and parents are not aware, and they don't feel free to share such an important part of their life to their parents. So just support your kid, understand them. It's okay, we all have our ups and downs, and children also are becoming children for the first time. So they don't have a guideline on how to do things perfectly. They don't have to be perfect. So don't set unrealistic expectation with your kids, and just encourage them and just be with them and spend quality time. I think that will be enough.
In the recent times, we've been seeing many cases where students are having sudden violent outbursts. So, what do you suggest that they should do to manage the anger?
So, anger is not the problem. Anger is a very natural emotion. The problem is how we express it. Whenever we feel angry, we usually become impulsive. We might say or do things that we regret later. So, the first step is to just pause. Take some few breaths, drink a glass of water, and step away from the situation. Few of the practical tips that I can give you would be, first would be identify your triggers. What makes you angry usually? We all have certain triggers that can actually trigger our anger faster than others. So understand your triggers. Second would be move your body. Stretch, walk, or any kind of physical activity can help release that energy. Third would be respond, don't react. Respond would be, I am feeling angry right now, I need some break, we can talk later. React would be when you kind of take out your anger in front of others or onto someone. So yes, it would be respond, not react. And last would be that you step away from the situation. Take a break, maybe listen to music, read your favorite book, and talk to a friend or do anything that you want. But stepping away from the situation will give your brain or mind some time to think over it properly before you maybe react impulsively. So, yeah, that can help.
Moving forward, I would like to ask you that how should children deal with their mobile addiction?
So, it is not really just about the phone, it is also about the habit. And phones are designed in a way to keep your attention, to keep you hooked. And to actually start to improve the phone addiction would start with small and practical steps. For example, that set a fixed time that you'll be using your phone in the day, and it should not be more than half an hour or 1 hour in the entire day. Next would be avoid usage of phone when you're studying or when you're sleeping. I would advise don't use your phone strictly at least an hour before you go to sleep and after you wake up, at least an hour after you wake up. So these are a time you should not at all use your phone, because the mind needs time. Before you sleep, the mind needs time to relax and go off to sleep. And before you wake up, the mind also has to get ready for the day. Another would be, which is also very important, replace phone with something that you can do in the day. Because if you're not doing anything, you will get bored and you'll again go back to your phone. So maybe try to play outdoors, maybe talk to your friends, or create something, learn something new. Because I feel the best childhood is when the child explores, learns, create things. And I always like to say this one quote कि बचपन online नहीं offline होता है. So I think this is how what I feel our childhood should be, because phone is just a part of our life. It's not our life. So we should all remember this.
Nowadays, many children and teenagers are being exposed to social media from a very young age. So, what do you think is the role of social media in developing a child and having an impact on their mind?
Okay, so starting with social media, I feel both social media and AI have their pros and cons. Starting with social media, it can actually give students, young adults or adults the space to learn, explore, and even express themselves. But it becomes a con when we think that the real life is a real life, because we often don't see people struggle. We see a very made up reality that they want to portray us. So, in that, it can also lead to comparison, insecurity, and we might think that our life is not so good as in comparison to others' life. So, I feel it is important to understand that what we see might not be real all the time. Another thing, if you talk about AI, it can provide so many good mental health support, resources, and tools. But if used properly, because if AI replaces human connection, I think it will have a very big impact on our emotional well being. So it's not about if AI or social media is good or bad, it's about how do we use it. So make sure that we use both the tools more mindfully, see content which is actually positive to us, and understand that real connection is more important than this.
I have seen that people are saying AI can take control over jobs.
I mean, it has been happening these days, but I wouldn't say that it's possible 100% because in the end, we all are human. We need that human connection, we need the human touch. So, yes, it might have an impact, but if we can use AI for an advantage, where we actually can make our job life better and easier. So I feel it's all about how we use it. So I wouldn't say it entirely true, but of course impacts how the usage of AI has been done.
There are so many people I know and friends I have. They avoid going to social functions because they don't feel comfortable enough. So, why do these people feel anxious in social situations and how can they overcome it?
Okay, so feeling anxious in a social situation comes from the fear of being judged. And usually, I feel kids or teenagers or anyone, they think that what if I say something wrong? What if they don't like me? What if I'm misjudged? So that's why I feel because of all these thoughts, you usually avoid going into social situations. And I think practical tips to actually help anyone who has difficulty in going into social situation would be start with a small group. Maybe start with talking to one person about how was your day, how are you doing, and then slowly build up to start talking to a group of two, three, and then maybe you can go into bigger groups. And confidence is actually a skill. The more you expose yourself, the more you feel confident in doing that thing. Another would be don't aim for perfectionism. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be present. If you don't feel like talking when you are around a lot of people, just stay silent and observe. That is also okay. I feel people also have this pressure that I have to say something, I have to give my opinion. That can actually pressurize them and make them feel more anxious. And last and not the least, I would say it's okay to be awkward. We all have our clumsy moments. We all feel awkward some or the other time, and it's completely okay. Okay, I feel imperfectionism actually makes things perfect.
Okay, ma'am, the next question I want to ask you is how does someone know if they have ADHD?
So, firstly, the full form of ADHD is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and it usually have three areas, which is attention, hyperactivity, and impulsivity. When we talk about attention, the child might have difficulty focusing onto one thing. They might shift their attention. They have difficulty in sustaining their attention. Another part would be hyperactivity, in which we see kids who cannot sit still. Even if they are sitting, they might fidget. They have to have some or the other to play around with. Their legs will be, working, and they might roam around in the class. And in terms of impulsivity, they usually act before thinking. That's why in class they might give impulsive answers or react before even thinking that it might affect someone or themselves. So, this is generally what ADHD means. But also understand that when we talk about ADHD in terms of attention and hyperactivity, sometimes even some children might have distractions, might have attention difficulty. So, it is important to assess if the child has ADHD or not from a professional, because we have certain tests which can actually help in the diagnosis if the child has ADHD or not.
Moving further, I have a question that what is autism?
Okay, so autism is a neurodevelopmental disorder. It is categorized by difficulty in language, social communication, and they could have certain repetitive or restrictive behaviors. And when we talk about autism, you might see that the child might have limited or poor eye contact. The child would have difficulty in understanding social cues. There could be delayed speech. The child would also have difficulty in accepting change in routine and a lot of other symptoms. And if we talk about what causes autism, the exact cause is not simple, but it is important to remember because there are a lot of genetic and environmental factors affecting it. But it's important to remember the most important factor if a child has autism symptoms is to go for early intervention, because early intervention can really help with the symptoms of the child. And the best therapies that we talk about, OT, which is occupational therapy, psychology, what we do, applied behavior analysis, and a lot of behavior therapies, and speech therapy and whatnot. So I feel an early intervention can really help to identify what the child has, because autism is a spectrum. So each child is different in their own way. So having a professional to diagnose, to assess, and to understand what all therapies will be required for the child is, I think, the most important part when you talk about autism.
Or is it something the child or the person is born with?
So that's why what I said is cause is not really simple, because there are a lot of genetic and environmental factors attached to it. And researches are still being done, but there is no one exact cause that we can say, okay, this causes autism. But one important aspect that I will say is that according to WHO, which is World Health Organization, they say there has to be certain screen limits. Like a child before 2 years of age should not use any kind of devices, phone, tablets, not at all for 0 hours, because it's a development of their emotions, their speech is getting developed, and a lot of things are getting developed. And at that age, if the child is using screen, the child might start having autism like symptoms, which can cause regression in speech, and that's why it can have autism like symptoms in
And
there.
is it a permanent disorder or it can be treated?
Well, I think it can be managed, it can be treated. Few of the symptoms stay, but with right therapies, we can manage it.
Next question I want to ask you is that can meditation really change the way our brain works or it's just a myth?
Definitely. I feel meditation has a very big impact on our minds, and over time, it can actually improve our brain functions. A lot of researchers have shown that if you do more meditation, your brain or your mind becomes calmer, it's easier to manage our emotions, and it can also improve your focus and attention. And meditation is actually not that complicated if you see. It could be as simple as just you focusing on your breath or your heartbeat. You can just close your eyes, you can listen to the sounds around you. You can also visualize your favorite place. You can close your eyes and think about you're on the beach or your favorite place. Even that is meditation. Even dancing is meditation, even singing is meditation. So when we think about meditation in that typical manner, that you're sitting and you're still and you're like closed eyes and only focusing on something, that's not just meditation. So I feel like find out what works for you. So if something that is making you be in more present, making you feel more calmer, that's what is meditation for you. And there is one meditation that I'll be especially talking about is Brahmari Pranayam. And this is when I talk about, I feel our culture, our philosophies. I feel we have so much rich literature, but we are moving towards the Western world. And the simple Brahmari Pranayam has so much impact on our brain, and it can actually activate the vagus nerve, which is responsible to keep our mind and body relaxed. And it is not very difficult. You just have to sit in a comfortable position, you close your eyes, inhale, and while breathing out, you have to create the humming sound, which is yes, easy. I think it is. It will not take us much time, and we can do it for 2 to 5 minutes in a day, and the impact is numerous. Another exercise which I would tell all the students, maybe before exams or when you feel pressured or when you feel anxious, is the 4-6-8 breathing exercise, in which you inhale for the count of 4, you hold for the count of 6, and you exhale for the count of 8. Longer exhales actually gives a signal to the brain that the mind is calming down, you are in a safer place, and everything is going to be okay. So we can do this again. Yes? Okay. So close your eyes, sit in a comfortable position. Inhale for the count of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold. One, two, three, four, five, six. Exhale. One, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight. And relax. How did it feel? Okay, so I think these simple practices of meditation in a day, not more than 5 to 10 minutes, can have a huge impact on our mind.
We've heard that you do so many activities like dance, yoga, along with your work, but there are so many people who complain that they cannot take out time for their health. So, can you please suggest a way in which they can solve this problem?
So I feel it's not about how much time do we give ourselves. Even 10 minutes of calm time with your tea or coffee or a book in your hand is more than enough. I feel a lot of people say that they don't get time, but I always, tell them that your mind and your body is doing so much for you. For the entire day, your mind is actually helping you to focus, work, your body is also giving so much physical energy for you to move around. What are you doing for your mind and body? It's the question I think we should all ask ourselves. And even 10 minutes of any relaxing activities can help, so why not? I actually advise at least 20 to 30 minutes of some activity you should do, and make sure to add some kind of physical activity in your daily routine, because I feel physical activity can actually be a good release for the mind and the body, and it can also help in lot of they say that when you do a physical activity, it releases endorphins, which is also the natural painkiller for the body. So my advice would be that just spend half an hour for yourself. That is more than enough. And just one last point, I would say that it's actually not about the number of tasks you have. It's actually about the mental load you have. A lot of people are always thinking in their mind, I have to do this, or overthinking about so many things. That creates that load, which is also impacting their functioning. So maybe plan out your activities, maybe list down the goals of the day, think about what are activities you can do this week, and plan accordingly, and you will feel much more relaxed and calmer.
Moving forward, I think almost everyone overthinks, and we somewhat know that it is not good for our mental health, but still we cannot stop it. So, can you please give us some tips on how we can deal with it?
Yes, I think the best tip is would be to try and be more present, and be present in the simplest of tasks. Even while you're brushing your teeth, focus on the sensation, focus on how it feels on your mouth, the sensation, the taste, also the feel of it. Even when you're cooking or doing some, when you're reading, focus on that. So I think being more mindful and present can be a better way to actually work on the overthinking. And overthinking requires something to release all of those tension and build up thoughts. So journaling can also be an important tool. I remember when I was in my school days, I had this habit of whenever I would go back home, in before sleeping, I would always note down how my day was, what did I like, what I did not like. So that actually helped me become more aware about my thoughts, my emotions, and also understand and release that negative, positive, whatever energy I'm feeling throughout the day for that day. So yeah, journaling is an important tool. And another thing would be understanding your thoughts. In psychology, we actually work in reframing the dysfunctional thoughts. So overthinking can also be kind of managed if you understand what kind of thoughts you are having, understand your patterns. So once you start reframing your thoughts, understand your belief system, understand your value system, that can actually help with the overthinking patterns.
Ma'am, I want to know that what is self-care and why is it important?
Also, we prepare so many things and plan so much for self care, yet we keep on delaying it. So, how can we deal with this laziness and procrastination?
Okay, so self care is actually very simple. It starts with our normal routine activities like taking care of your sleep, taking care of your appetite, your food intake, also indulging in activities where you're learning new things. So self care is all about how you take care of your physical self and how you take care of your mental self. And this mental and physical self needs an energy outlet and an energy consumption. So you can just focus on all these simple things, and I think that's more than enough if you talk about self care. And procrastination, I feel it's not about avoiding hard work, it's actually linked to fear of failure or less clarity or thinking that, I might not be able to do the task. So, to actually work on the laziness or the procrastination, it is important that you start with small tasks. Have short term goals rather than, long term goals that I want to achieve this or I want to complete this. You can focus on an hour goal or 1 day goal that today I wish to complete this task. I think that is also more than enough. Another thing would be there is a 5 minute rule. You tell yourself that I'll do this activity for 5 minutes, and once you start, somehow you will get along with that activity. There is also another technique called as the Pomodoro technique, which means that you take regular intervals and breaks between your tasks. So, suppose you were sitting to study, you study for 25 minutes, then take a 5 minute break, again, you study for 25 minutes and take a 5 minute break. This will also help you in your focus and you can study better. And remember, you can't use your phone or any screen in those 5 minutes. Either you walk, stretch, or do any kind of activity that you want, but no screens. So, yeah.
Okay, so what is therapy like? And when does someone know when to consult a psychologist?
Okay, so therapy is actually not what people think. It's actually a very safe space, and a therapist or a psychologist is not going to judge you or would give you or force their advice on you. It's actually as simple as they will understand your thoughts, they will understand your emotion, understand your personality, your patterns, and guide you in ways that can help you manage all of these. So it is actually, you can think of it as if you're talking to a friend with whom you can be open, and it can be as simple as that. And in regards to when to visit a psychologist, I think even, a lot of people think if I have some mental condition, that is the only time I should see a psychologist. But I think you can actually visit a psychologist even if you have some confusion in life or you feel you're stuck somewhere. Even that is an okay time to visit a psychologist. And if you have certain symptoms like it is affecting your sleep, your mood, you are overthinking, and there is a lot of negative thoughts around, so that can also be one of the way where you can consult a psychologist and understand yourself better. And I feel even the simplest question where there is a thing that I don't know how to manage this, or I feel things are getting out of my control, is also the time where you can visit a psychologist. So it can range from a simplest thing to a severe thing where you can visit a psychologist.
What's the idea behind opening Seven Steps Mental Health Care Center?
So, opening a clinic was, I wouldn't say was in my dream list. I always wanted to work in the mental health area. I always wanted to help people because I feel it has also helped me in a lot of ways that I can imagine. But when I came to Valsad and I realized that there was much need where, I feel the awareness is lacking in terms of mental health, and a lot of resources and support was not there. So that was a time when I feel I should open something where there could be a safe space for everyone who's struggling with their mental health. They can come and share their issues. So I feel that was the thing which kind of, inspired me to open Seven Steps. And the reason why I decided to name it Seven Steps, it is based on a book by Kundanika Kapadia, which is Saat Pagla Akash. And that book inspired me when I was in a very difficult phase of my time. And that book kind of, to just summarize it, it says that, our life will have a lot of phases. And each phase will teach you something or the other. And the seven step does not mean seven phases, but it's just like a analogy that we have taken. So that book was the inspiration why I thought that I want to name my clinic as Seven Steps.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for joining us. It was a pleasure to host you.
I would thank VMS for inviting me for such an inspiring and engaging podcast. And I would just end by saying that one book, one pen, one child, and one teacher can change the world. Thank you.